aggressive.
Yeah, it was.
Music.
It turned off right away.
Getting a lot of morning angst.
Yeah. Good morning. I'm so glad that this is happening because it was so close to not happening for a third time, and so I'm just like really excited. The days leading up to today, I was getting more and more excited about just the opportunity to sit with you people, you strong women who are raising kids. It's like just such a gift. And so just so thankful that y'all made the time to be here. I know you have a lot of other things you could be doing, so thank you for that. I did want to thank Dr. Richards and his vision for Family Matters and allowing me to partner with him to provide opportunities for our parents. We just want to make sure that we're taking good care of y'all. We do a good job with our dads, with Dad's Club, giving them the opportunity to meet together regularly. And so when we were getting ready for Family Matters and looking at our schedules for this year, we saw this gap in like not being able to serve our mamas like we really want to. And so that's kind of our hope with today's session. We knew that navigating motherhood would be really appropriate and something that we felt like we could offer. And in thinking about this, I was thinking about my best friend, Kristen Utter, and what an adventure it would be to do this with her. I saw that. I just thought it would be such an adventure to do this with her, but also Kristen is the best mom I know, and I feel like she has guided me, and her wisdom and her thoughts and her experiences have just truly ministered to me and have helped shape the mama that I have become. And I feel like she has so much to offer other moms. So I'm really here to showcase her.
And I'll showcase her.
But I also, if I'm totally transparent, and I'm gonna be, there's a lot of like, why me? And leading up to today, like why me up here talking to you people who are doing this, who have done this? And the Father has just really so sweetly settled my spirit around this. And I'm just so excited, so honored to be sitting next to Kristen to just share with you guys what I am learning in my own journey as a mom. And so that's why we're here today. And so we're going to start by just kind of telling you guys how we each came to be mamas, because it's very, very different. So for me, and I read my notes, so y'all just bear with me. So for me, I remember being a teenager and knowing that mama would eventually probably be something I would answer to. Like, it's just going to happen. That's what we do. But I was really afraid of it. And I was convinced that I probably wasn't going to be very good at it. I struggled with a lot of self-doubt when I was younger, and still do to some degree. But I just felt like it was something that would be really hard, and I wasn't sure I'd be good at it. But then my older sister had a baby, and it kind of changed everything. My niece was born, Lily, and she just kind of changed and ruined my life all at the same time in the best ways. My sister, thankfully, allowed me to be a very present, a very obsessive, a very excited and interested aunt. And so I got to play that role, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can totally do this. I gained a lot of confidence through her experience. And then about a year and a half later, my younger sister, Ruby, had her first child, Cora, Aisley. And she had her in New Mexico, and I knew what I was in for because I had had a little bit of experience with Lily, and so I was like, yes, even though she's in a different state, this is going to be awesome. I am so here for it. Let me be involved. And so for Cora's first couple of months of life, maybe 4 to 6 months of life, I was back and forth to New Mexico. We were just really excited to be able to be a part of her life to the degree that we could. But then we started to hear from my younger sister less and less, and things got pretty dark for her and Cora's dad. And so they eventually reached out to me and asked for help. And so Cora came to live with me here in Texas when she was 18 months old. And she became Cora Kaler when I adopted her on September 23rd of 2020. And it was a life-changing day for me. It literally changed the trajectory of everything, and it's how I became a mom. And Cora is now a second grader at CTC, and I'm just so happy for that experience. So that's how I came to be a mama.
Great. Before I share how I became to be a mom, I would be remiss if I did not just honor Miss Kaler. She and I not only share friendship, but we also shared a professional relationship for several years at a school together. And she helped me bring my son through his awkward junior high years and into high school. And she is every bit as qualified, if not better, than I am. So she says she's here to highlight me, and I can't tell you what an honor it is to highlight her, to say how fortunate Southwest Christian is to have her on staff, to have her loving on your kids, because she carries all her heart and soul into everything she does. So I just want to honor her in this moment and say thank you for having me. I am so thrilled to be here and to be with all you mamas and to honor you and to hopefully give you something to make you stronger today. So my testimony of motherhood, if you have a high schooler or someone getting close to high school, just hold on to your seat for a second, because I met my husband in high school. So I know it seems disastrous probably, but sometimes it works out. Sometimes it works out. So anyway, I met him in high school. We quickly, and as teenagers do, fell into love. I started into college. I took a semester off of college to get married. My mom held her breath for an entire semester, like hoping and praying that I was going to keep my promise to finish my degree, which I did. And so then there were two things coming out of college with my degree that I knew for beyond a shadow of a doubt. I knew that I would go into this world and I would do something creative, something musical, something expressive, that I would use the gifts God had given me to make a difference in the world, and I knew that I would be a mom. Like, I had known that since I was a kid. I had always loved children, always was great with them. I just had a knack for it, and I spent my entire teenage years making a small fortune, giving moms the day off and taking care of their kids, and I could not wait to have my own. And so when I got out of college and got ourselves established, and Aaron and I decided to start building our family, unfortunately, we faced a lot of difficulty. In fact, I lost 4 babies trying to build my family. And ultimately and thankfully, through many prayers, many tears, lots of heartache, we were able to successfully bring 3 children into this world. Our firstborn son, Jacob, who is now 24 years old and all grown up in the world. And then our daughter, Kara, who was born 3 years and 2 months after that. And then our daughter, Jordan, another after that. And that completed our family. Our baby, Jordan, is 17, and she's in her senior year of high school, and she's about to launch out. She's going to Texas A&M, and I'm trying not to cry. But anyway, so that's how I came into motherhood. So, this room is filled with stories. In fact, if we went around, everyone would share their journey to how we came to be called mom. And they would vary greatly, just like mine and Miss Kaler's stories are very different. But every single one of us have something in common. Each one of us carries someone else's soul along with our own through this life. And for our children, however they came into our arms, we want them to do well in this world, and we want to do well for them. And probably no matter how hard we work or what our days look like, there's always a little question in the back of our head, am I doing a good job? And so for just a second, since this is a workshop that I want to make everybody feel good, would you just turn to somebody in this room and just catch eyes with them and just say, you're doing great. You're doing great. It feels good sometimes to just get a little pat on the back for a second. Mothering is hard work, and mothering is heart work. It takes everything out of us. It is, award-winning journalist Elizabeth Stone said this: making a decision to have a child, it's momentous. It is to decide to let your heart walk around outside of your body for the rest of your life. I love that quote because I just don't think anybody's ever captured what it feels like to be a mom better than that. Being a mom is a beautiful and messy and heart-wrenching and deeply fulfilling role to have in someone's life. We must somehow provide the softest and safest place for our child's soul to rest, all the while preparing them to live in a world that is very often completely opposite that. We need to teach our children to respect and love themselves, all the while avoiding to raise them to be too self-focused, too egocentric. We need to teach them resilience and strength to overcome obstacles and hardship, but also teach them to be vulnerable and soft and in touch with their emotions. We want to guide our children toward accomplishment, productivity. We want them to know that they can make a difference in the world, all the while trying to teach them to avoid finding their value in what they do instead of who they're becoming. I could go on, but if I do, we'll probably all just cry in our coffee, and then we would just call this the weeping workshop, and nobody would ever come to any of these wellness workshops again. But the point is, we know in our head the destination for our kids. We know that we want them to become adults that are fulfilled and happy. We want them to be kind and courageous. We want them to make a mark on the world and leave it a better place than they found it. But how to get them there? That's daunting, right? So how can we do it? And while there's literally no way we could give you an exhaustive, encyclopedia of motherhood today, what our hope is that we can just give you a few practical mindsets that we can adopt and carry as moms to help us find a balance between our head and our heart.
Yes, and so before we get going on like these different types of mindsets, I want to outline something that I actually talk to your kids. If you have kids on Lakeside, I talk to them about this a lot. There's this model in dialectical behavioral therapy where it kind of shows us how God has designed our brains to work. So on the left side of our brain, I have a slide for this. I gotta keep remembering I have slides. On the left side of our brain, we consider that our reasonable mind. And for today's purposes, we're gonna call that our head. So the left side of our brain is our reasonable mind. And this is where we are rational, we are task focused, we rely on evidence and facts. We're just very practical and reasonable in our approach to life. So that's the left side of our brain, and we all have it. We all have a left side. On the right side is our emotional mind, and for today's purposes, we're going to call that our heart side. So that's where we're kind of emotion focused. We're kind of ruled by our mood, our feelings, our urges. That's where we do a lot of deep feeling. This is where we do a lot of deep thinking. And so in the middle, we have something called wise mind. And for me, this is where I feel like the wisdom of the Holy Spirit happens. And this is where we see the value of both, recognizing that the Father has created us to be logical, to be reasonable. He's created us with a reasonable mind, but He has also created all these awesome and deep and important and necessary emotions in us too. But we can't live all the way over here, right? And we can't live all the way over here. We have to recognize both of them. So when we're living with wise mind, which is right in the middle, then we are seeing that both of these are safe. More importantly, emotions are safe. So sometimes when we get all the way over here, we're not super comfortable with our emotions and our feelings. And so when we live in wise mind, we recognize that both are needed in order to operate in the way that God has designed us to operate. And so it's a balance of our head and our heart. So as we go through these mindsets today, we're thinking like the goal is really just inching back towards the middle, like where that wise place is, where the Holy Spirit can kind of guide and direct us as mamas. Okay? So that's how we're going to start before we go into the mindset.
Great. So we're going to find the balance between two things that might seem like a dichotomy, kind of like what I was talking about. Like we want them to be soft, but we want them to be strong. So for us in our role, we have a lot of those things where we seemingly have to carry two opposites at the same time in order to be effective with our kids. So one little dichotomy that we carry is that we are an authority, right? We are an authority in our children's lives. We want them to know that and be secure that we have already lived through the chapter of life that they are in, and that we have experienced and we have wisdom to offer them so that they can succeed. So we're an authority, we're an expert at what they're doing. But also, we're a companion. Like we want our children to know that we understand, we get them. And we empathize with where they are and the experiences and the emotions that they're feeling at any given chapter of their life. So we've got these two things that we want to try to find the balance, find the middle of. So a couple of really practical, easy things are when we have an opportunity to train or teach or advise our kids is to make a statement that lets them know we are both. So in other words, I could say to my child, you've never been 8 years old before, and I've never mothered an 8-year-old you. So together we're learning. See, so that way I'm a companion. We're fellow learners. But at the same time, I have been 8 before. So I probably have some pretty good ideas here to come up with. And so then I'm letting them know, you're safe. I've been there. I have some experience I can offer you. And at the same time, I'm just letting them know you're safe and I'm with you. And so that's a real practical way that we can help connect with our kids in that way. Another is to use illustrative language, to try to think in those moments, like let's say we're trying to get our kid to accomplish 2 or 3 simple things so that we can get out the door, and they're dragging their feet, right? They're going on. And there's a frustration building. So to stop in that moment and to think, what frustrates them? Hey, the other day when we were about to go get ice cream and you were trying to clean up the playroom or whatever, and your sibling was dragging their feet and driving you crazy because you were trying to get to baseball practice and then we were going to go to ice cream. Remember that frustration? That's how I'm feeling right now. I'm feeling angst because I really want us to get to school and be at peace. And it feels like you're dragging your feet. Can you help me in this moment so that we can move forward? Helping connect with them that the feelings you feel as a parent aren't disconnected from what they're experiencing in their lives. It's just a different scenario. So anything we can do to bridge that gap and help them understand that we're people too. And we have feelings too. And that we can help each other through those feelings is a great way to keep that balance between being the authority, hey, we got to get out the door, and hey, I know how it feels to be you, and you know how it feels to be me. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple of practical things.
Yeah, I love this piece too, because it talks about expressing to your child that I feel a certain way when you do this. And this leads us into the next piece here as an authority, which is teaching children the language of their emotions, like helping them to understand, like, you got things going on inside of you, and it's really important for us to talk about those things. Now, Lord have mercy, this is a difficult task. And I think what makes it so hard for me personally is the fact that she's not doing it overnight. She's not figuring this out overnight. This is taking a lot more time than I really wanted to. And I'm not super patient with the process, but I really, really need to be, because I'm learning that this is Lord have mercy, it's a journey. It's a journey, and getting her to understand that she's got all these emotions inside of her, and we've got to figure out how to talk about those, how to get them out. What Kristen just said about it, saying, how you did that, I feel the same way. I'm feeling kind of anxious about this. I'm feeling kind of frustrated, but letting them know what you're feeling, because part of teaching them the language of their emotions is modeling that. It's modeling the language of emotions. And so when we can teach our kids to identify their emotions, we're giving them this framework that helps them explain how they feel, which is helping them to make socially appropriate decisions about how they're going to respond emotionally to a situation. Because going back to that reasonable mind and our emotional mind, they do have those deep emotions, and they're going to have them, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do this. And so we have to know how to explain that and how to articulate that in the moment so that we can get the help that we need. So one thing that I'm seeing about just in my role here at SES, so I'm the counselor on this campus for grades 7 through 12. And before we go any further, I'm pretty sure we have mamas of lower school, middle school, and high schoolers in here, right? We've got them kind of all over the board. Okay, so this applies, what we're talking about applies to every single one of them. You'll just have to kind of do a little bit of this in your head to figure out age appropriateness for you guys. But what I'm learning, especially with our older kids, grades 7 through 12, is that talking about emotions like in the heat of the moment, like they've had a huge blow up and it's anger, and that is manifesting, and it's manifesting in all the ways. When we have that happen, or they have a huge meltdown and they are experiencing, like, they're sobbing and they're anxious and they're frustrated and they're worried, we tend to, and I know that I can say this because I tend to make a big old deal out of that. And I sit with Cora and I'm like, tell me all about your feelings. Let's spend the next 2 hours just working through this and talking about this. And girlfriend's 8 years old. And, our high schoolers are like, are you kidding, Mom? No, I can't sit here with you for the next 2 hours and talk about this. So what we're finding and what research is showing us is that talking about our emotions in shorter periods of time, but more frequently, letting it become a natural part of family language, that's going to be a way more effective way to reach our kiddos when it comes to teaching them the language of their emotions, rather than, once every 2 months when the big thing happens, as we sit down and we spend 2 hours on this and then we don't talk about it again for another 2 hours. So just developing this habit, this language of our emotions. So there are 3 emotional regulation phases. Yes. Okay. I have handouts that I want to give you guys at the end that kind of outline some of this for you, so you can take those home with you. But there are 3 phases that help us with this. And the first one is to help your child identify their emotions. So the way we identify emotions is by pointing out everyday examples. So you're in the grocery store, your teller is feeling seems to be really upset or really frustrated. Pointing that out to your child after you leave the situation, not in the moment, but after you leave the situation.
Look at her, she's frustrated.
Yeah, don't do that. But pointing it out later, man, they were really frustrated. They must have been going through something hard. I remember when I was frustrated the other day and then just talk to them about it at their age level. Obviously, we don't want our emotions to become a burden for our kids, but I think it's so appropriate to use the language of emotion and show them, point it out in everyday examples, even with family members. Like, they must be going through something hard, or, man, I remember when I felt worried the other day, and this is what, this is how that felt, and this is what I did. Like, just teaching them that through everyday examples, and also teaching them when you're feeling it too, just like Kristen was saying earlier. Like, I have this big presentation coming up at work, and I'm feeling kind of anxious. I'm feeling kind of nervous about that. Can we stop right now and talk to Jesus about it? Will you pray with me? Can we do this together? So pointing out examples that you see in everyday life, in your own families, in society, but then also in your own life. The next one is understanding what triggers the emotion. So really getting behind the why are we responding this way? So oftentimes you will see this at all ages, that the emotion doesn't match the situation. So they're having really strong emotions about something, and you look at the situation and you're like, nope, that should not be our reaction here. And so trying to figure out why. So sometimes, obviously you guys know this, there's something deeper going on. So asking all these really important questions like, exactly what happened? How did that make you feel? How did your body feel? What was your body telling you? What did you do? How did you get from there to here? Like, how did you get from if they're talking about something that happened at school, how did you get from second period to fourth period? And pointing out their resilience even. You did that. You got to the next thing. You got through that. So let's talk about it and let's figure out how we did that. And then the third one is just finding appropriate ways to respond to the big emotions. So this is on the handout too, but there's a couple of ideas. There's one for lower school, which would be a calm down jar. There's some activities you can put in the jar, so when they're experiencing a big emotion, that they can take a time out, take that jar, take something out that's an activity that they can do in the moment to help kind of regulate that emotion. There's a couple other ideas on the handout, and it goes into more detail on that one. But one that's currently working in our house, probably won't work next week, but it's working right now. We're dealing with anger. My little one is finding her voice. For the love. She's finding her voice. And so we're working through some things. And so what we've been using in our house right now is a calm down area or a calm down space. And so what Cora has done in advance is she has written on a piece of paper the things that bring her peace, the things that she loves doing, the people that she loves, all these things that are concentrating her focus. And she has chosen a space in her home, and she has put that paper underneath that chair with the fidget. And when she is feeling that emotion of anger, when she's feeling super heated, she has the ability to call a timeout on herself and be like, I need to take a step back, or I can suggest it. I never make her go to that area because that really doesn't work for me in the moment, but I make that an option for her. Do you need to take a minute and go and spend some time in your calm down space? And she'll say yes or no. And so what that's teaching her is how to meditate and pray through that emotion. So she doesn't really know that she's doing this because she's 8, but she's meditating. And in Philippians 4:8, I love the message. It says, summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating. Sometimes we think meditating is this weird mystic thing. It's not. The Bible tells us to do it. Meditating on things that are true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious. I love words. I love these words. The best, not the worst. The beautiful, not the ugly. Things to praise and not things to curse. Meditation, that's all it is. It's thinking on these things that are true. And so by giving our kids the opportunity to take a minute, remove themselves from the situation, and remember what's true. Remember what is beautiful. Remember what's authentic. The best. I love that one. Remember the best, Cora. We're not thinking about the worst. And in the moment, it regulates. And then there's work to do after that. That doesn't fix the problem, obviously. There's work to do after that. But that's an appropriate way to respond.
Great. I had 2 thoughts while you were talking. One practical thing, because I know we have some moms of older teenagers and such. And this is something that I actually learned as an adult for how to manage big emotions, is just a grounding technique, which is just take a moment of silence and just find 5 things that you can see and just notice something about them. So sometimes when intensity is happening or we're trying to work something out, especially with a teenager, you know how it can just get really big really quick, to just say, you know what, this isn't very effective right now, so let's just take a little bit and just be silent. And I'm just going to see 5 things, and you see 5 things, and let's just notice something about them and just let ourselves come back to center so we can try again. I think that was helpful to me as an adult, so I'm sure that would be helpful at any age. And then the other thing is a real practical, simple way to engage in emotional conversations about emotions. I don't know if any of you guys do this, it's a pretty common thing, but like around the dinner table, we always played high-low. So everybody shares like what was the lowest moment. Sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's really low, you know. And then we would end by everybody sharing the highest or best moment of their day. But like engaging into, like kind of diving into the emotions of those moments. Like, yeah, I tripped over my backpack, whatever, and I was super embarrassed. That happened this morning. And just taking those opportunities, like Miss Kayla was saying, like, oh my goodness, was that just the worst? Did anybody see? How did you feel? What made you feel better? What, you know, like, how did you start to kind of like recoup? What made you get, you know, have a better day? You know, and letting them trace like how either they or somebody, like the need for companions, like my friend said, don't worry, nobody saw it, or whatever. Those kinds of moments can help us just kind of trace through emotions in a way where they don't feel like they're trapped by us, like, tell me your emotions. I need to know. You know what I mean? Those moments never worked for me as a mom. The kid's like, what is happening? Yeah, you're like, I went to a workshop. But high-low has been a really great way for us to just get engaged, get our kids thinking about things and sharing parts of their days that maybe impacted their emotional or mental health that we would have missed completely if we just didn't take the time to do it. So those are a couple of practical ideas. And then the last one is my favorite. Like, let your kids share their frustrations with you and apologize when you blow it. Teach them that like mistakes aren't terminal and that we all make them and that grace and mercy is part of the way we live. That can take a load off, right? If we don't feel like everything is high stakes, that we can make mistakes, we can apologize, we can forgive, we can start again. I'm reminded of the scripture in Lamentations 3 that says that God's mercies are brand new every single morning. So if the sun comes up with brand new mercies from God, why shouldn't we give ourselves a little bit of mercy, give our kids a little bit of more mercy, let them give us a little bit of mercy, right? For sure. Letting them share with us what's going on and letting them know that it's okay. We mess up, they mess up, we can start again, we can try again, and we can head a new direction.
There's a question that you ask that is really, really brave.
Oh, I know. She says, we practiced this the other day, and she was like, don't forget to say the question. And I was like, don't worry, girl, I won't. But here I am forgetting. All right. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to tell you something, and I will acknowledge that this is terrifying. So don't feel like you have to do it. But I will tell you also that having raised a child to adulthood, I've seen the benefit of taking time to do this. Now, don't do this in the heat of the moment. Wait until you've just fed them ice cream and y'all are all looking at the sunset and it's just a beautiful, wonderful time and you're thinking about all the good things in your life. But saying to your kids at random times, what would you wish that I would do more? Or what would you wish that I would do less? Your kids will tell you. Brace yourself. Sometimes it's really, really life-giving though, because you're doing something that is just encouraging them along and you never would have known if you didn't ask them. And they're like, you know, when you pat my back the other night, I wish you would do that more. And you're like, oh, that's so easy, I can do that. You know, these things can be really life-giving, but they can also be really life-changing in a good way, even though they might be painful in the moment. I know when my son was in the 3rd grade, after school one day, and we were sipping Starbucks and I was reading Chronicles of Narnia or whatever, I closed the book and said, what do you wish that I did less? And he said, Mom, I feel like you always want me to do better, and I'll never get there. And I lost it. I mean, I started talking to him, and I started crying, and he started crying. And I mean, never in a billion years would I have wanted to have that kind of imprint on my son. But if he hadn't had space to say it in that moment, how many more times would I have made him feel that way? But in that moment, I got to find out, what am I doing that's making you feel that? What did I say? What can I change? And we had this really, I think, life-altering conversation in that moment. And even though it was really hard for me as a mom, and I cried my way through it, we connected on a soul level, and I was able to recalibrate as his mama. And then when I had a 14-year-old kid and a 15-year-old son, where a lot of my friends were saying, I can't get 2 words out of my kid, mine was still talking to me and still sharing life with me, and I just can't help but connect the two. And so I'm really glad I asked the question, and I'm really thankful. And sometimes it was just easy stuff. I do remember a moment like that with my baby girl. She said when she was about 8, yeah, I wish you just didn't look at your phone so much. And I had no idea I had gotten in a habit of just being distracted constantly by the dings and the pings and the whatevers. And so it was just a new thing that I could be mindful about and just be less concerned when I was with her about what was going on my phone. And I knew that I would automatically communicate more love to her just by making that little tweak. So yes, to answer your internal question, it is terrifying. It can be painful, but I will tell you, having brought kids all the way through, there are a couple of moments where those questions brought real life to me as a mom and made real big life-changing differences for me. So I'm really thankful I asked it.
Yeah, so in getting ready for this workshop, she told me she asked these questions, and I was like,
remember, I gave him ice cream first.
I know, but still, I literally thought that might be the bravest question you can ask your child. So brave and so terrifying that I haven't asked her yet. I'm like working up the courage because I'm just like, what is she gonna say?
She'll surprise you, and sometimes it'll be so exciting because you'll be like, I didn't realize I was so brilliant. I'm doing such a great job. I'm telling you, it's not always tears. It can be really great.
And then I asked her to I asked her, how often do you ask this question? And what'd you say, like once or twice a year?
Yeah, like twice a year.
I was like, do I need to ask it like once a month? Like, what are we looking at here? Because I'm a planner. I'm like putting it on the calendar. Ask Corey the terrifying question. So I'm going to do it, and I feel like I should like group text all of you and be like, I did it!
Right.
And y'all can pat me on the back.
That can make a good difference.
And wrapping up authority and companion real fast. Obviously, there are going to be times in our lives where you are 100% the authority, and you don't have to balance anything, okay? That companion piece is not going to fit into every situation, and we need to embrace that. And that one's a tough one, I think, for some mamas because we tend to shy away from that. But it's a positive and it's a good thing, and it's how God has designed this relationship to work. And we know that when authority is properly used, that it creates safety, it creates peace, it creates security, foundation, and there are going to be plenty of times in our kids' life where we are like all the way over there. We don't even have to figure out, do I need to do a little bit? Like there's going to be plenty of times where you're on that side.
Yeah, I think in terms of like a stoplight, a stoplight does not have a conversation with you about how you feel. Right. It's like red light, stop. And if you don't, your life's in jeopardy. So those kinds of moments, we have those as moms where it's like, stop, your life depends on it, and they need to know that, and that's a security for them. So I love that you reminded us that.
Yeah. And moving on.
Great. So we're going to find the balance between being a guide. So we're here. We've got a direction to go. Follow me. We're guiding our child. But then also, we're like, life can be fun. It's not all business. It's not all, a goal and a working toward it. We can find how to be a playmate, how to engage with our kids in a fun way. One of the easiest ways to do that is to find opportunities to share memories with your kids. Tell them about what you were like when you were their age. Remind them that you were where they are. And like connect the dots between what you've experienced and what they're experiencing. Letting them know successes and failures. Tell them about the time that you tripped on your own shoelace in front of the cutest guy in the junior class and you just thought you would die. Those moments help them see that we're here and we're just people and we're here in this journey with them, and it can help them embrace the laughter, and the funny things. You can tell them about the time that you and your friend laughed until you cried because of this or that. And it's just a great thing. I used to be in the classroom, and that was one of the things they said about connecting with your students. Is like, the more you share about your own life, of course, to an extent, helps you connect, and your kids really connect to whatever it is you're trying to teach them, because they feel like, oh, you're a person, like you're a real person that exists outside this classroom and has a life. Same thing with our kids. It can feel really disconnected because we're up here just doing business, and they're like living life in their little worlds. But to connect them can really make for a lot of like what is it? Effectiveness. Yeah, effectiveness seems like the right word.
As guide, it's really important that we show you why behind the choices that we make and how we live out our values. So I know this could probably be uncomfortable for some. It was for me in the beginning, but sometimes I feel like it's totally appropriate to point out to your child your own acts of kindness. Like when you're doing something good, which feels really weird, right? To like, hey, look at me, I'm doing something really awesome. Like, but pointing out your acts of kindness. So when Cora was little, she was probably like 3 or 4. Our neighbor across the street, she was a widow, and she had been in the hospital, and she had just gotten home, and she didn't have any family around. She was an older lady, and so we went across the street to check on her. And she's like, Cora's like 3 or 4, and did our thing with her, and then started walking back. And as we're walking back, Cora leans into me, so sweet, oh, she's so little, and says, Mama, you're so kind. And I was like, you. And I just thought, man, that's really sweet. And I didn't think anything of it really after that. I was sharing that story with a friend, and he was like, you know, you ought to point out to her why you're kind, like why you went across the street and checked on Miss Leslie. And so I was thinking that through and what that could have looked like and what kind of opportunity that could have been. If I had just said to Cora, well, this lady is like all by herself. She doesn't have any family. Can you imagine what it would feel like if our family didn't live here? I could not, on a side note, I could not do what I'm doing with Cora without my family. So pointing out to Cora, that would feel so lonely. Like, can you imagine being sick and being in a hospital? Oh, that would be so awful. But pointing out to her how that would make us feel, so the empathy behind it, teaching her empathy. But then more than anything, pointing out to Cora that this is what it looks like to follow Jesus. This is the kind of adventure it is. So like taking care of our neighbors, looking out for one another, and being kind and showing compassion and using empathy. Like, this is the adventure of Jesus, and this is what it looks like. And kids, they love to give, right? Mm-hmm. Especially our little ones. They're super excited about giving something. They love to make people happy. They love to go on adventures. And so showing them that following Jesus can be that. And ultimately, that is what it is. It's taking care of one another and making people happy and telling them the truth about who he is and how he feels about them. Like pointing out to her that this is what it looks like to follow Jesus. That kind of following Jesus is attractive to kids. Kids are like, I can get behind that. Even our older ones can get behind that, because there's not a whole lot of religion in that. That's just like the guts of the gospel. Jesus told us to do 2 things. He said, love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I feel like that's a really important thing that I need to be doing more of with Cora. And there might come a time where I don't do that anymore, but like right now, I'm like, yes, look at what we're doing here, girl. And this is why we're doing it. And then also just celebrating her own kindness, her own acts of kindness. We already do this, but pointing out when they are showing kindness, when they are showing what it looks like to follow Jesus, and they do something where your teenage son goes over to a friend's house whose friend just lost his dog, and he just sits with them. You know, that's Jesus. That's showing the love of God through silence and just being with somebody and pointing that out to your teenage son to let him know what you're doing looks like Jesus. That's kindness, and that's what it means to follow him. And then when your little one gives brother the last piece of candy, point that out. Like, that was so selfless. Like, that's what the gospel looks like. When Jesus was here, that's the kind of thing he was doing. He was like giving his stuff away and making sure that everybody had what they need. He was meeting needs. So just constantly reminding them of who they are. Reminding them, you are kind, you are a giver, you are empathetic, you are capable, you are strong. Like, just reminding them of the truth about who they are. But then also, like, reminding them of who they aren't. So like when she's manifesting in front of me, Cora, that's not who you are. That's not what we do. That's not who you are. That doesn't look like Jesus. I've seen you act like him. I've seen what you know, and you're accountable for what you know. So like pointing out both.
Before the workshop this morning, I was talking with Dr. Massey, and she was telling me that she's about to take 17 kids to South Africa on a mission trip. And so, like, opportunities like that as your kids get older, allowing them an opportunity to travel, to see other cultures, and to be part of making a difference in a community, what an opportunity. So here at Southwest Christian, you'll have those opportunities. If you can make a way for your child to be a part of that kind of thing, that can be about 400 lessons in one,
right?
And can really impact the way they see the gospel lived out and the way they embrace that adventure of following who he is. Yeah. So I love that. So another really practical, easy thing to do in the day-to-day is to just try to embrace the play that is just kind of wrapped up inside of the daily chores, the things that can get really mundane. Like, we all know that you can say to a kid, all right, go up the stairs, get your shoes, get them on, get back down, we've got to go. And that could take 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. We could all be yelling, we could be pulling our hair by the time we're getting out the house. Or you can just grab your iPhone and say, hey, I wonder how fast you could go upstairs and get your shoes on. I wonder if you could beat my record. My record's 2 minutes. Do you think you could do that? I'm going to set the alarm. Ready, set, go. And the kid doesn't even know that they're doing what you want them to do. They're setting the world record. Running. They're about to get documented. They're running, sweating, and you're like, great, let's go. So things like that, where we can kind of just remember that life can be fun, even the simple stuff, even the stuff that is not, like, doesn't seem at first glance as something fun. If we can find the little simple tricks and things to make it fun, that can really make life a lot easier on a daily basis. I was thinking about, like, if you have something that you need to do, like study for a spelling test or something, and then you're like, well, we had dinner, we're going to clean up, we've got to study for the spelling test, maybe this is not your kid's forte, but you're saying, but afterwards we're going to have ice cream sundaes. So for every 3 words we get done, we'll add an ingredient. So then you're like, this now is a game. Like, we're getting the thing done that needs to be done, but we're building a sundae. Things like that. Just thinking of just simple ways to to help our kids engage that life is what we make it. That we can choose happiness, we can choose joy, we can choose fun, even in the things that don't initially seem that way. One of the things I love that my husband has done since my kids were little, I don't even really, well, I actually do know why he does it. But we'll just be like, sitting at the table, we just finished dinner, we're just chilling. There's nothing really spectacular happening at all. And he would do this thing, where he would just kind of stop the air in the room. He'll go, wait. Do you know what this is? And then the kids would be like, what? And he'd be like, this is happiness. This is happiness. And what he's teaching them is you don't need external things to bring happiness to your life, to bring contentment to your existence. Just living and having a family that loves you and sharing a meal, that's happiness. So he was teaching our kids to embrace simplicity with just a simple statement here and there when he kind of had that moment, stopping at the zoo. Happiness. That's just the thing. And so now everybody knows what it is. But anyway, so those things.
I love that, and I've adopted that since I knew that they started doing that. I've adopted it, and it's so, like, grounding. It's grounding for me. Like, we don't have to go and do all these big things that you could have the opportunities to do, that it's just so simple, and happiness is truly just so simple. And so I absolutely love that. Maybe with your older kids, embracing the play could really just be like contributing together. So a question I often ask on this campus of your kids is, what are you contributing to your homes? And how are you specifically contributing peace to your home? And what are we taking away? And so ways that we contribute together, both emotionally and practically. So, like, how are we taking care of the house together? And I have to ask myself this question too, like, what am I contributing as a mom to the peace of my home? Like, how am I contributing, and what am I taking away? So there's, like, all these moments as a mom where you're just like, crap, I'm not doing a great job. And so that's a hard...
New mercies. Yeah, every morning.
Mercies. But that's a question I find myself asking. Like, what are we contributing? How are we doing that together? One thing I really like about this is it's teaching our kids what kind of homes they want to have. what kinds of families they want to build, what needs to be core for their family, what does happiness look like for their future families, and what kind of peace will they want to protect in their home. And it gets them like involved in the process of being a part of a family. Like, you're contributing something, and if you're not contributing peace, then we're going to figure this out. But like, it gets them thinking about their own families one day and the homes that they will want to have one day.
Yeah, and I love that so much. And one of the things that I think is also really empowering to our kids is to ask them what kind of home they want. You know, like when you're just chilling and talking, you know, like what kind of home environment do you really want? And then in those moments, they've helped build the world. And so now we're saying like, okay, we've agreed together. Like, you told me you want to live in a peaceful home, but this doesn't feel peaceful. How can we fix this? How can we recalibrate? I always forget who it is, but whoever you are, I give you credit. There's a statement that says people are much more willing to live in a world that they helped create. Mm-hmm. And so that is an empowering thing, especially as our kids get older, to give them that power to help create a goal, help create an ideal. And then together we're going to work toward it, and to invite them to follow you on it if you're the one taking peace from it, or if you're the one who's, you know, because then they're learning to live in community. They're learning to live as the body of Christ, to bear one another's burdens, and to help each other, and to confess our faults and be healed. All of that is what God created us to do, and we can teach that inside of the family. So that's a really great idea. I love that. And then lastly, remembering to celebrate small victories. You know, like at the beginning of this workshop, and we just stopped for a minute and said, like, you're doing great. Yeah. Like, we didn't do anything spectacular this morning. We woke up and y'all are all looking really cute. So, I mean, like, you got yourself together. You got here. You got kids where they need to go. That is amazing. Yeah. Like, that takes something out of you. You accomplished something today. So taking time to celebrate small victories and teach true values. Like, there's a quote that I absolutely love from Mr. Rogers, who is like a friend to all children forever. But here's what he said, and I sit with this so much. He said, "I'm proud of you for the times you came in second or third or fourth, but you did the best you've ever done." And I'm convicted by that. Like, how many times do I just think about the finish line and not about what have I accomplished for myself today? Mm-hmm. For some kids, getting out the door in the morning is a victory. And to celebrate that in that moment and let them know that it feels good to accomplish something. Those moments can really build a lot of like energy and life-giving, encouragement into their daily lives, just the mundane things. So I love that.
That's good. The Mr. Rogers thing.
Oh yeah,
y'all.
We're kind of obsessed.
That's my bro.
May have a coffee table book.
So he has this one quote that says, "If you can mention it, you can manage it." And your kids should know this quote if they're on this campus, because I use it all the time. But basically all that's saying is, like, when you can talk about what's going on inside of you, like when your kids can learn the language of their emotions and articulate all that stuff that's going on inside, it suddenly becomes less scary. It's more manageable. Somebody else knows. And I feel safer. Like, there's just something about getting it out and saying it out loud that just makes it feel like, okay, I can do this. It's just somehow less scary. I probably should have led at the very beginning with this disclaimer, and I didn't, but I'm gonna give it now. Pretty much, if not all of what we're saying today, you guys know. There's nothing new under the sun. You guys have heard these things. You're probably implementing all of them or some of them. But sometimes I know I need this. It's really nice to sit in a room with a bunch of women, strong women who have the same job. We all have the same job as moms, and just be reminded of what's true. Like, just be reminded of these things that we know from time to time. We may not need it all the time. I kind of do. But from time to time, just sitting together and just being reminded of what's true. So know that, like, what we're saying, we recognize you guys know this stuff. You've heard it probably your whole lives as moms. But we're just reminding ourselves of what's true today, with really nice food and drinks and views.
Right. This view.
Okay, so leading into that, as we wrap up, what are we on? Guide and Playmate. Mm-hmm. I think that as guide, and like I said, you guys know this, it's becoming so vitally important for us to slow down and be fully present with our children. So we have all the things to do. Our list is getting longer. I feel like society is like just running. We are just running, and we have meals to cook and games to go to and laundry to fold and houses, all these things that we are responsible for. And it's just seemingly getting busier, especially the older they get. But it's still so critical for us to slow down and like hold their tiny little faces in our hands and look them in the eyes and make space to listen. There's a lot of research out that is showing us the soul connection between a mama and a kid at any age when you look them in the eye. There's just something that takes place. And like, I'm looking at Cora all the time because she's always talking. But when I'm not looking her in the eyes, very rarely do I like look her, like, think about it. Very rarely do we actually look our child in the eye and like focus on everything that they're saying and what they're trying to get across to us. So taking that time to really slow down and make space. So with our teenagers, specifically our teenage sons, I don't have any of those, but your teenage sons, we're seeing more and more that there's not time to talk about the hard things, because the assumption is if they're not talking about it, it may not be happening in their lives. But let me just tell you, I'm seeing it in my office. It's happening in their lives. There is so much going on inside of them because they were designed that way. The Father designed us to feel and to feel deeply. We just oftentimes don't know how to talk about what we're feeling. And so it's happening inside of them. And with the busy pace of our lives, they're not finding time to express that, to tell their mama, to tell their dad what's actually going on. And so sometimes it's awkward silence, but the longer you sit sometimes with the silence, there's a little bit more space for him to say that one more thing. And so just being mindful that like we've got to make that eye contact, we have to make that space to give them the opportunity to say something, is just really, really present with me right now, and what I'm observing a lot with our boys up here on Lakeside.
I was going to say, when you were talking about that, like as an adult, I was doing some therapy to work through some traumatic things that we'll talk about later. But one of the things that really helped me is that our therapist kept telling us, your body is talking to you. Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I'm very quick to dismiss what's going on in my body, because I have things to think about and I have things to press through. And I think sometimes as believers, we kind of have absorbed this thing that like it doesn't really matter how we feel, we're just going to keep on going because we're victorious, and that's all true. But our therapist kept saying your body is talking to you. So I was thinking about that when you're talking about teenage guys. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of times they feel things physically, like I just don't feel good. I just don't, yeah. But sometimes if you can trace like what's going on in your body and when did it start and what is triggering that, and sometimes you can trace from the body to the emotion. So that's just like something that was really helpful for me, for my husband, for my son, when we were like trying to process some trauma in our lives, was like starting with the body. Like, what is your body telling you? And then see if you can trace it back and figure out what's the emotion that's there. What's the message?
It makes sense that God would do that.
Right.
I feel like he kind of knew what he was doing when he put this whole thing together.
Right. Yes. All right, so are we ready to move on to the next balance? Yes. Okay, so the next one, this is the hardest one for me, so I'll just confess that right up front. That's the dichotomy that we have, that we are nurturing our children, right? They come to us, these little wriggling, innocent, vulnerable, pink, soft things, you know? And we've got to protect that unique individual that God has designed them to be. Like, we want to hold them. I still want to hold them like this. They don't let me, but this is what I want to do. But then also we have to empower them. We have to teach them, you're capable. You can overcome. You're stronger than you think. You can accomplish goals. You can do hard things, all of those things. So there's this like seeming dichotomy, like I want to protect you from all the hard things, but I have to teach you how to overcome all the hard things at the same time. That is hard. That is probably the hardest thing for me as a mom, is knowing when and what and how much to do of those things. But you know, in Proverbs, it says, train up a child in the way they should go, and then in the end, they will not depart from it. But one of the most wonderful messages I ever heard was when a pastor broke down the words that translated should go, train up a child in the way they should go. Because I always just thought that means teach them right and they won't forget it. But it's really much more like near to the heart of God. What that actually means in the original language is that you should train your child in the way that they are naturally bent. So in other words, God created them unique and special in a certain way, and there's a bent to the way that they are as a person. And if we study that, we can train them toward what God has designed for them in this life. And in that, empower them to walk the path that he has planned for their lives. And for me, that was really a great insight to stay close to as I raised, different kids, because they're so different. Parenting is not a one-size-fits-all at all. I mean, we all know that. But it can be easy to just go like, you know what? Your brother didn't do that till he was 10, and you're not doing that till you... I mean, it's just really easy. But to study their bent, to study the way your one child, the middle one, or the, is bent, and try to find out what makes their eyes light up. What triggers them? What do they get frustrated with? And try to work with them in a way that can train them toward what God has planned for them. And then they'll not depart from that. They'll follow that path that God has for them. I love that.
I want to add to that real fast. Here on Lakeside, in our junior Bible class, our part of the curriculum covers the Enneagram. And so if you've had a student that has gone through 11th grade here, your student learns a little bit more about their bent. And so I would encourage you, of course this is years from now for some of you, so just remember this, to learn about your child in that way. Like, what is their Enneagram number? It's just like a wealth of information about how your child is bent, and that's really, really, really helpful.
I love that. Yeah. And then when empowering, one of the things that I love is that we're giving our kids permission and power and confidence to do it. We're teaching them to advocate for themselves, especially as they're getting older. Like, not being the one, like, I'm just going to tell you, and I know it's hard. If your child can advocate for themselves, especially as they get older, if they can make an appointment with that teacher, if they can talk to that coach before you come in and intervene, you are preparing them for life so that they can hold their own space and they can know how to negotiate when they come to a crossroads. That is a great way as they're getting older, is not stepping in quite yet. You're there for them, but letting them try to solve the problem first and then stepping in with them. I've found that to be really, really helpful and empowering.
I have a handout for you guys that's tips to empower and nurture your child. So on one side, it's like ways that we can empower them. On the back side, it's ways that we can nurture them. So it's kind of hard to figure out that balance sometimes. Kristen's going to talk about that, I think, in a minute.
It's terrifying.
How to get there. But those are just some basic ways that we can empower and that we can nurture. And then it's not broken down by age, so you just have to pay attention to what works for your age.
Yeah, and I think, there's a certain logic to it. Like, your child comes into the world completely dependent on you. Yeah. Nurture, 100%. By the time they leave your home, you're hoping they're completely empowered and they know you've got their back, but they can just go out into the world and handle it. So there's kind of this sliding scale of where we're just like nurturing a little less, empowering a little more, nurturing a little less, empowering a little more, empowering. And that's the thing. But even in that, like my daughter, her senior year, my daughter has a real natural problem-solving mind. She's real great at navigating. Sometimes I'm the problem, she's like, I can figure it out. But as a senior, I talked to her about like her path for getting all of, if you have not been there yet, I'll pray for you. God bless you. There's like a checklist that's a billion things long that you got to get done, but to get into college. And there's all these little things. And so I was like checking in with her, but I felt like this was a really important time. So I was like, girl, you are so good at problem solving. I want you to take this on. I want you to, chase it down, like advocate for yourself. If you can't figure out how the website does, find the phone number, call the admissions office, ask the questions, do the things. And I was all in the midst of empowering her, and she was doing a great job. But then one day she came up against an obstacle, and I was talking to her about it, and I was, cheering her on. And all of a sudden I just noticed something in her countenance. And I said, what are you feeling? And she just goes, I just feel really alone. And I was like, nope. Nurture. So then I was like, yes, this is my time. So I was like, you are not alone. I've got you. And so I found that particular obstacle was just too much for her. And so I stepped in, I helped her navigate to the next point, and then I took my hands off the steering wheel, and she started just going, doing a great job. And she's done such a good job through all of that. But I needed that moment to go, whoops, I didn't, I pushed her a little too far, a little too hard. So that's checking in, is always good. Studying their face and seeing She does not look like she's thriving today. That helps me a lot with finding it, but it is precarious. It's not easy.
That's good. Matthew 22, so this is from the Message. It says, love the Lord your God with all your passion and prayer and intelligence. This is the most important, the first on any list. But there is a second to set alongside it. Love others as well as you love yourself. These two commands are pegs. Everything in God's law and the prophets hangs from them. So we've heard this verse our entire life, right? We've heard that part about love your neighbor as you love yourself. I've also ignored part of this verse for pretty much my entire life. This verse has been setting with me this entire year. Like, it's heavy on me. This idea of loving my neighbor as I love myself. So I'm not great at it. And I feel like as mamas, we don't love ourselves in the way that we have been designed to really love ourselves. But it's something that's present with me, and I'm determined to get better. But what is really in my face these days is like, I want my daughter to know her worth, to know her value, to like take care of herself and love herself and be at peace with herself, so that when she thinks about who she is at peace with that. And I feel like I'd be missing the most important opportunity. I am the woman in her life. You are the woman in your children's lives. To show her, to model her what that looks like. To know your worth, to know how valuable you are, to know how to love yourself and take care of yourself, while at the same time trying to teach this kid to be selfless.
Right.
And to be others-minded, and talk about a freaking balance. Like, there's a balance there, but it is, I think in having a kid and raising a daughter in particular, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this. Oh, she's going to see this, because her little image is on the line here. And I'm not saying that if she doesn't have me modeling this for her, then she's, that she's screwed or something. It's not like that. But I do think it's really important for us to at least acknowledge that it would be a missed opportunity on my part, because I'm the woman that she sees. And so I really want to teach that. When nurturing, I feel like we're teaching our kids how to love ourselves. And when empowering, we are teaching them to love their neighbor. Because that's the other part of it, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And loving ourselves is setting boundaries. It is having self-worth. It's mindfulness. It's protecting self and others. It's meditation and prayer. It's nurturing your mind, your body, and your spirit. And ultimately, by teaching them to love themselves, we are raising confident and resilient kids who are empowered then to, in turn, love their neighbor, which is what the whole thing is about.
Yeah, I used to teach a couple of junior high Bible classes at the school where I taught, and when we would talk about how to manage our emotions, there was one example that I gave one day that just seemed to click. And so a great thing to kind of keep in mind, it's good for me, it helps me in managing our emotions through this journey of life. I would say, like, life is like a road trip, and you're driving down the road, and your emotions are the kids in the back seat. So the kids in the back seat, if they're well cared for and all their needs are met, they're just like trucking along, we're singing with the radio, everything's great. Sometimes they get squawky and loud, right? And when that happens, the very first thing we say is, do they need tending? Like, do they need some attention? Is there a need that's unmet? And so we can do that with our own emotions. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I starting to feel this squawk inside of me? Why are my emotions like that? And then sometimes they just need to hang on, like they're gonna be okay. So we can empower ourselves to push through. Like, I'm gonna be okay. This is gonna be, and we just tell them, stay buckled in. We'll be to the rest stop in 10 miles. It's okay. You're gonna survive. So we can do that with our emotions. And then I would just tell them, what's the one thing you never do with a kid on a road trip? You never let them drive. Never. Because no matter what the intention, that kid is going to drive you right into the ditch every time. And so, like, don't let your emotions drive. It's not that we're ignoring them. We're paying attention and figuring it out. But we're never letting them just drive us, because they're never going to take us to a healthy or good place. So that seemed to really resonate with kids, especially as they get older and they're kind of like navigating life and figuring out what to do with their emotions. So it helps me. It helped me yesterday. So. All right, so the last thing is, we have it on the balance, but I actually, whenever we were talking through it, I was like, I actually think these are our two superpowers as moms. the way God designed us, we have two superpowers as people in general, and that is one, to recognize our limits. And the reason why is because that connects us to our truest source of power, which is the Lord, and all of the things he has put in our lives to help strengthen us and help us along. I don't know about you, but one time I remember it just hitting me like a ton of bricks. There's a verse in Psalm that says, the Lord has compassion on us like a father has for his children because he remembers that we're dust. I think sometimes I forget that I'm dust. I think sometimes I expect myself to be more than I ever was created to be. But the Lord never forgets. He knows who you are. He knows what your limits are, and he didn't create you to be more than you are. The Lord has a power and a source and a grace for us when we connect to him to help us be who we need to be in this world. And to teach our kids how to be who they are created to be in this world. And so recognizing our limits is actually a power, not a weakness. And the other is to utilize resources, to not miss out on that. There's nothing, I think, more powerful as I've gotten older and older in life to realize that how many resources went unused when I was young because I thought I should have it together. I was afraid to ask the question. I was afraid to reach out for help. But to teach our kids from a young age that resources are there as a gift of God to help us, that it is a strength to say, I don't know how to do this, or to reach for a mentor or an advisor or somebody to help us, that is a great life skill. Just model that as a mom. These things can be superpowers in our life and allow us to really be strong, fortified lives in our faith and in our freedom. So when things feel bigger than we are, we do. Philippians 4:6-7 in the message says, don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. I always just say, hey, you can't help what you're thinking, but just turn them into prayers. Like, it's hard to shut your brain off if you say yourself, I can't worry. Well, then, I don't know, that feels like a prison to me, because then your thoughts are still there. But instead, take the worrisome thoughts and turn them into prayers. Let the Lord know you feel your limits in this moment, but that you know he's there. And remind your kids that he's there. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers. Let God know your concerns, and before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. I love how the message says that. Ultimately, it's going to be our kids and Jesus. They're going to grow up, they're going to become adults, and they're going to be making their own way and raising their own families. And we're going to release them into the most capable hands they've ever been in, and that is Jesus. And so if we can teach them to know that connection, to know it firsthand all the way through their lives, then they'll hold tight to that, and they'll live strong and meaningful lives because of it. So just passing on that faith.
There are going to be times when we're going to need to seek professional help.
Yes. Girl, I've done it.
Yeah, same. That's a thing. And so sometimes we don't necessarily know when we're there. And so on one of those documents, on the back, there's a list of questions like you can ask yourself, like when to seek professional help. And it'll just kind of outline, like if you're answering yes to a couple of those, then maybe it's time to seek professional help. And like that's also recognizing my limits and utilizing my resources. So I've had therapists like growing up, and then I have one as a counselor. I still have a therapist.
Yes.
It's just a thing. And so there are times when I really believe that is God's answer, and his design for us is to utilize the experts in our lives. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is like inviting God into our lives. Somebody gave me the best advice when my son was an infant. I think he was about 1. Somebody said, look at somebody who has kids in the next chapter of life who is reaping some type of harvest that you want to reap, and ask them what they say. Ask them what they did. Ask them how they thought. And I started doing that proactively as a mama, young, and I was so much the better for it. I'm very fortunate to be in a community of faith at our church. We have a formal program. I think it starts at about teenage age all the way through adulthood, that like you can literally just fill out an application and say, I really need a mentor in trying to navigate this, and they'll match you with somebody. But I've just tried to start instilling that into my daughter, and when she's in college. I've asked her to intentionally have a youth leader that she's just kind of organically learning from, and then she normal mentor relationship with a lady that she meets with coffee just to talk about life. And then we have actually reached out for a therapist in our family life that I was just not confident that she was able to process through on her own. So having mentors in life is such a blessing and such a fortification and such a comfort. To encourage that and to model that for our kids can make them so much stronger in this world and make us so much stronger for it. So.
Yeah, there's something really valuable about your kid hearing from other people. The same thing you're saying. So the mentors and the people that you want in your kid's life, they have to be people that you trust and people that are like-minded with you. But there's something so valuable about your kid hearing essentially the same message.
Yeah.
But it's a different voice. Like Cora, it's just my voice at home. And so there are lots of times when she's like, I'm ignoring that voice. And so she needs other voices. And so I have built a community of people that speak into her life, speak into my life for the love, because I need help with this. Mamas who are a few chapters ahead. I have to have that. I can't do this without my community of helpers. It really is a team effort.
Yes.
So what do we do in some of our extreme cases? So loss of a child, loss of a parent, loss of a spouse, some type of childhood trauma. So those things are a little too much to talk about today, but there's hope, there's good news. Kristen has recently released a book that speaks very directly to this and speaks about the loss of their second daughter, Sweet Kara, and how her family navigated the trauma and eventually came to a place of healing and hope. But finding that balance all along the way, and it is just such an important story. It's an important way to approach these big things, but also just if you're companioning, if you don't haven't experienced some type of great loss like this, it helped me to companion people who have, and so this would be a great resource for you guys. It's called Shatterproof, and you can find it anywhere they sell books. So I just want you guys to know that that's a resource you can have. So, to wrap up, we're going to do a Mr. Rogers exercise.
Woo!
I feel like we will properly honor him.
You know what's coming. We're super fans, sorry.
Okay, so what I want us to do is I want us to think about the women in our lives who have modeled for you being an authority and a companion, a guide and a playmate. Women who were nurturing and empowering. Women who recognized their limits and asked for help. So I want us to take 45 seconds and just think about these strong women in our lives.
Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity to be called mom. However we were brought to that moment and that role, we know that you appointed it for us, and there is grace for us, Lord, to carry this important role in the lives of others. It's near to your heart, God, and we thank you that you have given us everything we need in you. I thank you that we've had some time to just connect, to encourage each other, to talk about tips and tricks that can help us along the journey. And Lord, I pray a blessing over every woman in this room. I pray that right now they would feel your grace and your delight over their lives, that they would feel a sense of your presence and your power, and that, Lord, they would know that you smile over them, that you sing songs of joy over their lives, over their families. You see the heart and the effort that they're putting into what they're doing. And I pray for your blessing and favor. And we thank you, Lord, that you will empower us. Our heart's desire is that maybe in 20 years when someone asks our kids to think of women who did these things for them, that our face would be in their mind and that they would say, I'm so thankful for my mom and what she gave to me. Lord, we entrust all of this to you, knowing that he who began a good work is always faithful to complete it. And we thank you that you go with each of us today, tomorrow, and every day after that. We love you, and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for being with us.
Yes.
We're so glad for this opportunity, and we hope you've been encouraged and have a few tricks in your pocket that might help you along the journey.
Thank you, guys.